Well, this video is going to be about farm murders, as you can tell about the title and also the image that I'm currently showing you now. This is something that's been a big issue for South Africa, not necessarily because well, farmers are being killed at an extraordinary rate. They're not really. They make a very small percentage of the total murder and assaults of South Africa's criminal statistics, but rather that it's been politicized and it's been made to much more bigger thing to also be included in conspiracy theories such as White Genocide. We're going to explore through all of that because describing what a farm attack slash farm murder is very easy, as we've already gotten the definition since 1997 and 1998, which is, as I'll tell you now, an attack on a farm that it can be included like small holdings, large farms, and the people who are victims of that attack can be the owners, the laborers, and anyone present on the farm. And those are the definitions that have been accepted by South Africa and many other countries. And that's pretty easy to know. But where the difficulty comes into this is the motivations of these attacks. Why would farmers be attacked? Because there's nothing wrong with the argument of saying, well, farmers are a very important part of any country. They are vital into the survival of our species because if you did not notice, we happen need to eat at least 3 times a day, at least once. And that's something that's very vital for all of us. Our food supply needs to be secure, especially in these trying times that we're currently in. But is this in reality something that's actually happening? Are our farmers being killed at a disproportionate rate because they're farmers? And we'll get into this right, and thus threatening our cultural and economic and food supply. Is that actually happening in our current day? And we're going to be looking through some of that stuff because that is where most of this debate is coming around, of not the definitions nor that farm murders are happening, but what it means actually. So as you can see here from a whole huge list, we have not only Institute for Secondary Studies debunking farm murders, which goes through a lot of the stuff. We have recent spat of farm attacks to dispel racial emotive rhetoric. Then we have the more black farm workers are killed than white farm workers. And then we have blood and dust, the plight of southern farmers is far from black and white. And however, another whole list. And we have something where a lot of this comes from, which is the report of the Committee of Inquiry, which is a lengthy document, as you can see, 483 pages that go through a whole host of things, from literally the historical background of this sort of attack to all the parts of South Africa, and then we could go into the actual coordinates, the data, the statistics, and then the conclusion that it derives from, and even goes in the end solutions for these things, which we'll also be going through as well. This is a lengthy document, and this is full of like scientific terms that not a lot of ordinary people will be able to understand, and also is very hard to read. Most scientific papers on any topic, no matter what it is extremely hard to read. Not because it's done that by design, it's because in science we have to be very specific with our language. As we can see here, the report of Committee of Inquiry to Farm Tax has been a long time in the making. The committee was appointed on 4th of April 2001, and it was hoped that they would be able to bring out its findings before the end of the year. It became clear to the committee very quickly it could not do so. There are many reports and other literature on the farm tax in existence already, and to bring out another one quickly would serve no purpose at all. The committee would only have laid itself open to accusations of superficiality. Furthermore, much more of the previous work done also responsible for some incorrect perceptions about farm attacks. It's a whole host of just hard to read material that not a lot of people will be able to do. If you do feel like you'll be able to read this and be able to understand this, then go ahead. It's an interesting read, and I recommend all of you going through it. But we're going to go through a much more condensed version of this. So let's first start off with this. So with all these farm attacks, a lot of people are concerned about this, rightly so, as I've stated before, that this could threaten our food supply. And, murder is wrong. We all came to the conclusion. And a lot of these myths surrounding this are necessarily that why is it a lot of white people are being attacked? And we'll go through that now. But another one is why are they so violent? It can be provenly seen from not only personal accounts, but also from just the stats on the subject that a lot of farm murders are extremely violent. Like, if you look at some of these stats, I'm not going to describe them now because they're very horrific, but they're extremely, extremely horrible. Why is that the case? Well, from what I've seen, from this one and many other uh, stats and articles that I will link down below, and you can go check it out for yourself, is that for a few reasons. One, farmers are more vulnerable than urban areas. Rural areas are far more vulnerable than rural urban areas, which I should specifically say, because what happens, rural areas do not have the proper infrastructure set in place to be able to, you know, keep safety above, and so it makes much more of a prime target. And not necessarily because, and here's the thing, rural areas don't have a lot of crime, but their crime's often a bit more violent, and because as I said before, they're more vulnerable. There's not a lot of people who have firearms or are trying to do that. And when attacks do happen, police normally takes 3 to 4 hours to be able to arrive at the scene, especially for farms, and a whole host of other issues. That's one reason why they're so violent. But that's not necessarily because they're racially motivated, which a lot of people may lead you to believe that they are racially motivated. They are not. They simply are a product of circumstances of just being in a rural environment. Now, the second one, which is the one a lot of this has just been dredging through, is white genocide. Now, I wish to play devil's advocate for a moment and reach to the choir, reach to the other aisle of this discussion. Is white South Africans facing discrimination? Now, I will say this. I do believe that there is some racism to an extent, as we can see here, and I'm only using this because it's very easy to just see because Wikipedia has a much more better tally of information than I have, and you can clearly see it right here. Not only racism against white people, but also anti-white violence from a whole host of things, And I'll link all those specific articles in the description below if you want to look at it. But a lot of these are very eye-opening, saying that yeah, a lot of the time when when black on white racism happens, it's really downplayed on the media. There's a whole host of reasons why, but it is downplayed, and that kind of sucks because it feels like you're being obfuscated to the side because you don't really matter that much in the discussion. And I can get that. That sucks for a lot of these people who feel like they've been rightly discriminated against. It's the equivalent of saying how a lot of men do feel like they're being prejudiced against because of how they're being treated as emotionless, stalwart, uh, stoic beings. That they shouldn't really cry because they were hurt by a woman and being in some way have an act of violence against them. And I can get that. Same thing for these statistics and these articles describing how white people feel persecuted under this under post-apartheid, and I can get that. Now, obviously to a different extent, but I do get that. But in regards to this farm murders, none of this has been demonstrated that is racially motivated by black people in against white people. There's nothing that's really indicating that. And now here's the thing that I wish to tell you all. How do we describe intent? Because in all intents and purposes, we have no idea what criminals think. We cannot read their minds. As same as you can't read my mind. But you can intuitively understand their positions by looking around their actions, their past history, and what they've stated both by close friends and to much more larger gatherings to be able to interpret intent. Now, for me, you can probably interpret my intent. I'm not necessarily trying to be against one side of the group. I'm just trying to figure this out as much as any other person is. And these people who are attacking farmers, we may describe their intent as not necessarily having a lot of racial motivation against them. We can see, especially in statistics from Africa Check, which are fact checking a lot of these statistics, we can take all the way to the bottom and we can see what are the is there a political agenda. So we have identified. Now again, obviously we can identify them by saying, for example, robbery. If it's robbery, it means they had an explicit intent to go to a farm holding, to take the stuff, and then to leave. If they were to specifically have a political or racial bias, as suggested here, we would then see them make some demonstration of that, either by attacking them and shouting at them specifically in a racial or political charged manner, or that their scene will be marked by political and racial charged manner. They wouldn't rob or wouldn't have any attacks on labor relations or intimidation, as these ones suggest over here. And that's inherently how we can understand that it's not really racially motivated. Now, if they're not racially motivated and there's no act against white people here, why are a lot of people all of a sudden acting like there is some sort of attack on white people and a sort of genocide on white people? Now, I have something that I believe can describe why this is happening a lot. The myth of white genocide. Now, a lot of you, depending on how politically involved you are, there's been a lot of talk on white genocide lately. You can see this from the Europeans accepting a lot of immigrants from the Middle East, from America accepting a lot of immigrants from Mexico, and also from the Middle East as well. And you can see a lot of this rhetoric, especially in Africa, from South Africa accepting immigrants from Zimbabwe to Nigeria to a whole host of other places. And a lot of this rhetoric is used specifically to say that they're coming in to our land to take over our jobs, our homes, and to kick us out of our rightful lands. And this is a lot of the things that white genocide tries to make you feel like. They try to make you feel extremely vulnerable that you're going to be persecuted against because of your race. And for a lot of people, it kind of makes sense, right? Intuitively, you can think that a group from another nation coming to your nation, now taking a lot of jobs that you could have filled as well. That kind of sucks, and I can get that, but this kind of misses the economic point, and especially on how cultures change. In this article, and I suggest all of you read this. I'm not going to read it because it's extremely long. It goes into a whole host of detail. It's very long, but it does a really good job in describing a lot of the issues with the myth of white genocide. Is that white genocide doesn't understand that labor as a resource is just a resource. You could have 50 iron or 100 iron. Both of those are resources. It doesn't matter where they came from, it's a matter that your country is using them. That's why in all the GDP calculations and GNI calculations, they always minus imports from other countries and sales from other countries because those do not make up the GDP. What makes up the GDP is if the money is spent in our country for our citizens for our benefit. Same thing for immigrant labor. They come to our country and they spend money here. They don't spend any money on anywhere else. And especially because the way to solve this is not to kick them out, but to improve education so that our citizens have a lot more education and will therefore have a lot more better chances of getting higher positions because no one wants to be a janitor, no one wants to be a sewage cleaner, no one wants to be an electrician. They always want to be something a lot more higher elevated. And this is what myth of white genocide preys upon. It preys upon ignorance, thinking that a lot of these people of color come against you and start to like ravage a land, like destroy your culture and whatnot, which is another thing that white genocide means. Culture has changed forever. We can look at South Africa at the beginning. South Africa, at least the white population, was predominantly Dutch and English. We're not Dutch and English as a majority anymore. We don't take a lot of cultural influences from from the English Isles or from the Netherlands. We don't take any influence from that either. We our own culture now. We've been certified as a distinct and unique sect of English and well Dutch, now called Afrikaans. We're something different. Culture changes a lot, and it's not something that happens naturally or unnaturally. It just happens. It just happens. It evolves. And I also think of what a lot of white genocide tries to prey upon a lot of people who are comfortable with their current life and situations and are preying on their fear of the unknown. There's a lot of reading here, a lot of things, especially from international claims, as we can see here, that a lot of the international use South Africa to bolster their own base, basically, as President Trump has, for a large amount of the time in his office, tried to fearmonger a lot about Mexicans and Muslims coming into the country and killing everyone, where that's not really what happens a lot of the time, and especially because stats have found a lot is that immigrants, at least for America's one, don't actually cause any more harm than the domestic population. Again, a lot of this does just seem, and especially from recent cases, because a lot of these ones that I'm showing you now are from, 2017, 2015, and whatnot. And so, this one, which is one of the new ones from KwaZulu Natal, there's no real motives. It's mostly just robbery and just getting away from well, most robbery, not getting away from like places. Another specific statistic in another one, but this one specifically is just like robbery. It wasn't like racially motivated or politically motivated. It was just robbery, which is bad still, but it happens. But now, when we get all these points to see this, what shall we do? Because farm murder is still happening and it's still important. Even if it's not a large amount of farmers being murdered, we should still stop it because they're a very vital part of our economy. Now, how do we do that? As I said here, this one suggests a really few good solutions. Now, there's obviously the short-term one and the long-term one. The short-term one is simply to be alert, to be trained, to have a police station, polices patrolling these areas specifically. But the long-term solutions are to lower crime rates, which by basically means that we have better infrastructure in place that people would less likely to go into crimes, and secondly, to have infrastructure placed properly so that we'll be able to capture criminals much more faster. And a lot of the long-term solutions are harder to accomplish, especially with our country's current circumstances. It's a lot of reading and it's really hard to understand. I can get that a lot of people just wanted to get something told to them and that being the face value truth. But sometimes it's always harder to understand what's true and what's false. I hope you at least gain something, and I hope you at least can read one of these articles. All these articles are extremely interesting and give you at least a lot more insight than the news headings and the clips online and whatnot. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this was fascinating to you all, and I hope you all get to be a better person and a better factual entity later.